Hey everyone, Miss F here. Happy Wednesday to everyone. Stryker's being a real pill. He's on the floor with his bully stick. He doesn't want to be a part of the presentation today, so we'll let him stew in his own juice. Here we are, back to Babe and Me by Dan Gutman, Chapter 8, Payday. Ansonia Hotel. Dad instructed the taxicab driver. We hailed the cab when Dad got tired of lugging around the sack filled with 75 baseballs. And step on it, I barked. I'd never been in a cab before, and I always wanted to say step on it to a cab driver the way they do in the movies. It was a big yellow car, a Studebaker, Dad told me. The cab stopped at the corner of Broadway and 74th Street in front of a big old building. The corner of the building was rounded and was really fancy. The cab fare was only $1. Dad handed the driver a $5 bill. Now, have you been in a cab lately? Have you been in an Uber or a Lyft car? Pricey, but they're really worth their weight in gold. I love Uber. Keep the change, I told the driver. I always wanted to say that too. Dad shot me a look, but he couldn't help but chuckle. It was fun throwing a few dollars around when we knew we were about to make thousands. The driver hopped out of the cab and ran around to open the door for us. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, he kept repeating. If he made $5 in a week, that was a lot of money in those days. We're here to see Mr. Ruth, Dad told the doorman in front of the Ansonia Hotel as he slipped $1 into his hand. Now, if that guy got a nickel tip, that was big bucks. 7th floor, sir. Thank you, sir. When the elevator door opened on the 7th floor, it was like there was a New Year's Eve party going on. The apartment door was open and people were spilling out all over the place, wandering in and out of every room. They didn't even look like baseball players. There were guys in suits and ties, women all dressed up, bums and rags, and all kinds of other people in between. Nobody paid much attention to me and Dad. They were all talking and laughing and dancing to music that was coming out of one of those old-time record players with a huge horn attached to it. Now, if you know what those are, that's called a Victrola. A telephone was ringing constantly, but nobody bothered picking it up. Babe Ruth was nowhere to be seen. Dad and I walked around the apartment. That apartment was way bigger than my house back home. Must have been 10 or 11 rooms. Took up the entire 7th floor of the Ansonia. None of the rooms had a TV set. Of course not till the 40s. But most of them had a radio that was the size of a TV set. Why are there pots all over the floor? I yelled to Dad over the crowd noise. They're spittoons, Dad shouted back. You spit tobacco juice into them. Sure enough, I saw some guy lean back, launch a stream of brown goop into a spittoon from 10 feet away. It was an amazing shot to me. Nobody else seemed to be impressed. We looked all over the place but couldn't find Babe Ruth. Dad noticed a door to one of the rooms was closed. He winked at me, knocked softly on the door, and opened it. The babe wasn't in there either. 2 girls were sitting on a couch. They looked up at us. One of them looked a little older than me, the other one a bit younger. They were doing their homework, it seemed. A lady who must have been their mother was reading in a chair. Oh, I'm sorry, Dad said, backing out of the door. We are looking for Mr. Ruth. Daddy's in the kitchen, most likely, one of the girls said. We closed the door, looked at each other, and mouthed the word Daddy to each other? I never knew Babe Ruth had kids. Took some time, but we finally pushed our way through the throng of people jamming the hallway to get to the kitchen. Sure enough, there was a babe in the middle of everybody. He was in his street clothes, brown pants, tan shirt. Watch this, the babe boomed. He was chomping on a cigar and he had a baseball bat in his hand. He held it over his head, straight up and down. Then he leaned back and put the knob end of the bat on his nose. When he had the bat balanced, he took his hands off it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Everybody counted. The babe kept balancing the bat on his nose. Soon the bat wobbled a bit and the babe moved his head to the right to keep the bat steady. He went a little too far and the bat wobbled the other way. It was impossible for him to balance it anymore. Before the chant reached 7, the bat toppled over and clonked him right on the head. Everybody laughed, but I didn't. I rushed over to the big man. Are you okay, Babe? Babe let out a big laugh and rubbed his head. Solid rock, he chortled. Most of the people had streamed away into the other rooms as if the show was over. Mr. Ruth, Dad said, stepping forward, my name is Bill Stoshak, and this young man is my son, Joe. Do you remember us? Babe stuck out his hand to shake. It was enormous. He had big calluses on his fingers, I guess from gripping bats. Sure. You're the kid I nearly ran over today on Riverside Drive. Gee, I'm sorry about that, kid. Gotta be more careful. No, I said. That must have been somebody else. Are you the kid who asked me to come to his confirmation? No. Babe, Dad interrupted. Joe tried to get your autograph when you drove by Union Square Park today, and some man pulled a knife on him. Oh, yeah, Babe roared. I remember you. You are my lucky charm, kid. That guy could have been planning to stab me. You might have saved my life. I really didn't think that Babe Ruth remembered me at all, but I didn't care. There I was in his apartment, talking with him. I'd actually shaken hands with the great Babe Ruth. Now, how many kids could say that? I was so happy. I didn't care if I got to see the called shot or not. Babe, Dad piped up, seeing as how Joe saved your life and all, would you mind signing some autographs for him? Sure, Pop, Babe said. What you got in the bag? Toys for all the kiddies? Christmas ain't for 2 months. Not quite. Dad opened the sack and Babe leaned over to peer inside. He whistled, not much of a whistler, when he saw all the boxes of baseballs. You don't have to sign them all, I said apologetically, which made Dad shoot me another one of his angry looks. Hey, you didn't have to save my life either, Babe replied. Come on. He led us to a quiet room, shut the door behind us. Sitting down at the desk, he dumped out all the boxes of baseballs. Then he pulled a fountain pen from his pocket and signed the first ball in a smooth, flowing line. I noticed he wrote right-handed, even though he threw and he batted left-handed. As Babe picked up the next ball, I peeked at Dad. There weren't any dollar signs flashing in his eyes or anything, but there might as well have been. One by one, Babe picked up each ball and signed it. I would have thought he would be sick of writing his name on things for people, but he didn't complain. He didn't make up an excuse so he could leave. He didn't ask for any money the way today's athletes do. And he didn't stop until every single baseball had his signature on it. Babe picked up the bag of baseballs. He didn't know it, but that bag was now worth $375,000. Dad collected the balls and carefully put them back in the sack. Babe didn't know it. Dad couldn't stop thanking him. I promise you, Dad said, we will never ask you to sign anything else ever again. Babe didn't seem to mind or care. Hey, I'm starved, he suddenly said. You boys want to go grab some grub? Let's get out of this dump and strap on the feed bag. Isn't this your party? I asked him, following out of the room. Yeah, so what? He replied, unconcerned. He pushed his way past anyone who stood between him and the door. Who are all these people? Dad asked, as he struggled to keep up with the Babe. How should I know? He said, grabbing a big, furry raccoon coat from the closet. Let's go. Now, can you imagine somebody that big wearing a fur coat? He had to look like a bear. He was like a tornado, moving one way almost randomly, then another, sweeping up everything in his path. There was no point trying to control him. Dad grabbed the sack of baseballs and we piled into the elevator behind Babe. This would be an adventure. That I was sure of. This is called Living Big, Chapter 9. Babe pulled a floppy hat from the pocket of his coat and put it on his head so it nearly covered his eyes. Still, as we rushed down Broadway behind him, people stared and pointed and called his name. Even though he was disguised, Babe was instantly recognizable. I knew a joint where nobody will bother us, he said, hailing a cab. After a few minutes, the cab pulled up to a place called Delmonico's. Babe tossed the driver a $20 bill for a 75-cent fare. I thought the driver was going to faint. He was so happy. He probably didn't earn that much money in a week. He didn't earn that much money in a month, believe me. Delmonico's was a really fancy restaurant with big mirrors and chandeliers and waiters walking around in tuxedos. When the owner spotted Babe coming in the door, he rushed over and bowed like the King of England had arrived. He led us to a private room in the back that was separated from the rest of the diners. Will you be having the usual, Mr. Ruth? The waiter asked. Yeah, Babe agreed. I'm so hungry. I could eat a cow. I will have the usual too, I chimed in. I always wanted to say I'll have the usual. Babe laughed like it was the funniest thing he had ever heard. Bring out your best steaks for my guests, he instructed the waiter. I'll have a beer to go with mine, Dad said. Now remember, this is 1932. Beer? Babe stared at Dad with an astonished look on his face. Where you been, Pop? Ain't you never heard of prohibition? Alcohol's been illegal since 1920. Oh, I forgot, Dad said, a little embarrassed. Babe roared with laughter. A pitcher of beer for me and my friend, he told the waiter, and a soda pop for the boy. Then he turned to us and whispered, I don't like rules. Never did. In seconds, the waiter brought out our drinks. We all clinked glasses. To the Cubs, Dad toasted. May you demolish them in 4 straight. Here's mud in your eye, Babe said before draining the whole glass in one gulp. You look like a ball player. Pop, ever play the game? Only in high school, Dad replied. I'm a machinist, currently between jobs. Yeah, you and everybody else, Babe sighed. Don't worry, Pop. The depression will be over soon. I got a hunch Hoover's going to find a way to beat this thing. Dad glanced over at me. He told me that Franklin Roosevelt would beat President Hoover in the 1932 election. It would be many years before America would come out of the Depression. Me? I got to find a way to beat them Cubbies. When do you leave for Chicago? Dad asked. Tonight, Babe replied. Our train leaves from Grand Central at midnight. I snuck a peek at Dad. He glanced at his watch. If we were going to witness the called shot, we had to get on that train, and we both knew it. It wasn't long before a waiter brought out an enormous platter of food. He put steaks in front of me and Dad, then placed a semicircle of plates before the Babe. A thick steak with a border of lamb chops around it, a whole roast chicken, a mountain of mashed potatoes, corn, peas, spinach, bread. I couldn't believe any human being would be able to eat that much food. Dig in, boys. My steak was delicious, but I couldn't enjoy it. I couldn't take my eyes off the Babe. He ate like a starving animal that had just made a kill. He tore at the food, ripping it apart with his knife and fork and shoveling it into his mouth. At the same time he was swallowing one mouthful, he was filling his fork with the next one, barely stopping to chew. He emptied the entire ketchup bottle onto his plate. Food and gravy dribbled down his chin. He didn't seem to care. I was fascinated. Can we get some seconds over here, for crying out loud, he bellowed when his plates were empty. More food arrived in short order, and he attacked it with nearly as much enthusiasm as he had the first helping. Just when I thought he possibly couldn't handle another bite, he asked, Hey, kid, you eating that? I told him I was finished, and he scooped up what was left of my steak off the plate like a hawk diving for its prey. In seconds, he had devoured it. Some dessert, Mr. Ruth asked a waiter who was clearing off our empty plates. Excuse me. Apple pie a la mode, my good man, said Babe, and don't scrimp on the mode. Dad and I each had a sliver of pie, but Babe finished most of it himself. Then he washed everything down with another pitcher of beer. This was an awesome performance. If somebody had been there watching Leonardo da Vinci paint the Mona Lisa, I thought it had to be something like this. I felt like I should give him a standing ovation. That hit the spot, Babe said, satisfied as he wiped the corner of his mouth with the tablecloth. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a bottle. The label said bicarbonate of soda. Babe didn't put the white powder into a glass of water as I expected. Instead, he just dug out a heaping spoonful of the stuff and shoved it in his mouth dry. He let it settle in his stomach for a few seconds and let out a belch that, I swear, rattled the stained window behind me. He followed with the loudest fart I had ever heard. Hey, who cut the cheese? Babe chuckled, then roared at his own joke. You know, Babe, Dad said, you might think about losing a few pounds. Dieting a little, that extra weight's going to slow you down as you get older. Dieting, Babe laughed. Dieting is for guys who hit singles. You got to eat big if you want to hit big. And boys, I swing big with everything I've got. I hit big or I miss big. I like to live as big as I can. A waiter came in. He put the check on the table. And I think about all the food they ate and the drinks they had and left. All the food we had eaten only came to $25. Babe peeled off a $100 bill from his wallet and dropped it on the table like it was a quarter. The waiter didn't rush to come and get the money, and Babe didn't seem like he was in a hurry to leave. I figured it would be a good time to pick his brain and find out if he was planning to call a shot. So I said casually, do you have any plans for Game 3? Like, specific plans? Yeah. I got a plan, Babe said. I leaned forward in my seat. Maybe he was going to tell me he would call his shot. My plan is to murder them Cubbies. I mean, do you plan to hit one out of the park, Babe? Kid, Babe said. I always plan to hit one out of the park. I mean, on one particular pitch, get over here and stop growling at me. On every pitch, Babe replied. Well, I had found out one thing anyway. The called shot was not something Babe Ruth cooked up in advance. If he was going to do it, this would be a spontaneous thing. Is it hot in here? Babe asked. As we talked, I noticed that droplets of sweat were appearing on Babe's forehead. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and mopped his face with it. He seemed to be breathing heavily and suddenly looked very tired. His face was getting more pale with every second. Boys, Babe suddenly said, holding the edge of the table. I think I'm going to be sick. Then his eyes rolled up toward the ceiling. He toppled off his chair and hit the floor like an elephant that had been shot. And that's where I'm going to stop for today. So I hope you enjoyed that. We'll keep going, guys. And I hope you have a good day, and I hope you're doing everything you can to stay occupied. Go have some fun. And this little one was going to growl at me. So we'll catch you later, Gators. Love ya. Bye.